Hello and welcome to this episode of Bush Footy Legends. Before we begin, we would like to acknowledge that this podcast is being recorded on the traditional lands of the Noongar people and pay respect to their elders past, present and emerging. The show is produced by Magic Studios and presented by the WA Country Football League in partnership with Healthway, promoting the Think Mental Health message. On this week's show, 100-game Claremont great and Cable Beach goal-kicking champ Keifer Yu. Keifer won 5 flags across the grades and was a fan favourite at the Tigers, but he also knows some things are bigger than footy. He's got an important message for country footballers to set them up for life after sport. I'm your host, Jackson Barrett. Let's get into it. Keifer, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's brilliant to have you on. It's a busy time for you. You've just had a second kid. You're playing footy up there. How are things? How's Broome life treating you?
Yeah, it's going well at the moment. Thanks for having me on the podcast. I actually just started my paternity leave for a couple of months. They're calling it daddy daycare.
Mate, still playing footy at the moment. So Cable Beach, you've had an unbelievable season. You've already kicked 62 goals. Can you talk us through how footy is? It's a pretty strong side you've put together up there.
Yeah, we've got a good team, good bunch of blokes, a lot of ex boys that have played in some WAFL as well, and a pretty talented side at the moment. So we haven't lost a game yet this season.
And what are finals shaping up like?
Yeah, it's probably between us and Derby. Where they finished first and second, and pretty convincingly as well.
Mate, we'll start with growing up in Broome. What was that like as a community to grow up on, and where did you find footy up there? How did you come to be a footballer? Yeah,
it was growing up in Broome. I can't complain about that. The area we live in, we got beautiful beaches, and it's a pretty strong knit community. I learned to play footy from just sitting with my old man when he used to watch. He was a Dockers man, so every afternoon on the weekend we'd always sit down and watch footy, and then I'd always just go out the back and kick the footy to myself. I'm the only boy. I've got 4 sisters that were only a couple of years older than me, so and then the juniors, wasn't like it is today. There was a little bit of junior football, but not as much, and probably not from the younger ages, from, I guess, what they do today, like 6 upwards, no was kicks. I was always playing with my older cousins, and learning off them.
How much of an influence did your cousins have on your footy, just giving you, with not a massive junior setup, how important is it just to have someone to kick the footy back to you, so to speak?
Yeah, well, that's where I learnt most of my footy, me being the youngest boy in my immediate family. You always sort of had to be a bit tougher and stronger. So, and that sort of developed throughout my career and how I prided myself when I played football. I learned to tackle, on bigger bodies from a younger age. And, my cousin, we always used to watch wrestling as well. So the WWE, and we used to muck around doing that in the bedroom as well. So that sort of helped as well.
They talk about sort of players that have played from that really young age, play with a little bit of instinct, and things like tackling technique and stuff like that come really naturally. Was that something was it like that for you? Do you find that you're an instinctual footballer?
Yeah, definitely. I really prided myself on my tackling and I guess my skills as well.
What was your sort of relationship with country footy once you were able to start playing? And I think you played for a couple of different clubs up there. What's it like coming through as a junior in Broome?
It's good. Back they didn't really have Colts when I was coming through. So as soon as you were 16 upwards, even sometimes 15 upwards, you'd just train with the men's comp. And when I started, I just followed my brother-in-law who played for Cable Beach, and had a few cousins playing for them as well. But when I was coming up, they had a pretty strong side back then as well. So I actually trained. I'd come back on the school holidays and train with them. And, I just wanted to get a game to have a run on the weekend. So I actually didn't get selected with them. So I ended up playing my first game for Bidjadanga with some other cousins. and it was against Cable Beach, funnily enough. And it had some, the one memory I have is one of the past players who's passed away now, Brett Claudius. He played a bit of WAFL as well. I was 16. I think he'd just come back, so he was pretty developed footballer. And, I remember catching him holding the ball, and my cousin running past and saying, "That's my cousin."
It would have been the perfect start to league footy, and obviously playing against men is always so good for your development. You mentioned watching the Dockers with your old man. Were you a Dockers kid growing up, and were there any players at the club at the time that had any sort of influence on you as a young footballer growing up?
I actually went for the Eagles because my
Right.
my nan went for them. My dad's mum.
Yep.
She was a religious, and most of my external family were religious Eagles supporters. I followed that way and sort of went against the grain against my old man. So a bit of competition in the house. And yeah, I used to love watching all the Indigenous players play. One of my favourites was Winston Abraham.
Yep.
Taking his high fly marks. So he was one of my favourites, and then McLeod was another one.
Could light up a game, couldn't they? What about, so you mentioned going back up to Broome for school holidays. You went to school at Hale. What was that move like for a Broome boy who's obviously grown up so close to family and so linked to family in your community? What was coming down to Hale School like?
Yeah, it was tough at the start. Big difference academically. I look back in hindsight now, I wish I tried harder at school than but you can't go back in time. But it was good, I guess, to get out of my comfort zone moving, and especially for my football as well. There was a lot more opportunities, and you sort of get recognised a bit more being in the city, and playing in those PSA competitions, and then obviously from there going to the development squads.
It's a different culture around PSA footy, isn't it? So different from anything you would have seen in the country. What do you remember your first couple of games of PSA footy and playing for the school? What was the sort of the build up around game day like at Hale School, and also the on-field stuff? It would have been quite a different style. Guys that have probably had a little bit more coaching and that sort of thing along the way.
Yeah, definitely. I think as I was coming into the first 18, that was when they sort of started developing the football programs at the schools. So it was probably in the first couple of years that they just started doing it. We had, a lot of, Cale Morton was there, the Morton brothers. They were coming through Hale as well.
Good country boys.
The Benjamins, Warren, Benjamin, and Clinton. And then, a few others that, grew up watching them and watching the limelight on them and how they sort of come through, and then just playing with some of the boys, watching the development and seeing what they go through.
What about from there? How does Claremont come knocking? So obviously through the development squads, do you remember the first time or the early days someone from Claremont started to take notice and made an approach on you?
I think it was just through the playing club footy, and then getting selected through the development squads, the 14s, 15s.
Whereabouts did you play your club footy in Perth?
I started at West Coast when I first moved to Perth, and then I ended up moving to Marist just because there was a couple of schoolmates playing for them. So.
And what was it like coming into that Claremont system? You're obviously a Broome boy. You've moved down to Perth. You've had the experience at Hale and playing club footy and the like. But Claremont's it's a different beast, isn't it? It's a big footy club with plenty of history. What was the first experiences at Claremont Oval like?
Sort of. I remember playing at half time one day when I was. That was my first experience there, playing the junior leagues at half time. And sort of won an award there, and then playing through the junior footy ranks, it was sort of like a privilege. You get I never thought I was one of the best footy players, but seeing the others around me that I played with, and some have gone on to AFL level now, was playing with such skillful players that sort of put me instead to where I've come to today.
And obviously, Claremont, one of their catchment zones is up in your part of the world in the Kimberley. Were there a few Broome boys at the club at the time, and did that help in getting settled there?
Yeah, definitely, especially when we played the development squads. They'd select them because a lot of them, the others that were in Perth at the moment, a lot of them went to Clontarf, so
yep.
They didn't, we didn't play club footy against each other, or school footy against each other really. So it was good that through those development years we created like a bond, I guess. Especially when your majority is white, I guess. The Indigenous boys usually just gel together and come together when they're when they're minority. So we did that from a younger age, and then it sort of came through when we came to Colts.
So on Colts, one thing that stands out is you won a premiership in 2009, and looking at that game, I can't help noticing, one, you kicked 2012 132, which is a monstrous score in a grand final, and Fife 6 goals. I've got this image of a young Nathan Fife. We know when he came into the league, he was pretty impressive in his first couple of years. I've got this image of him sort of ragdolling 17-year-olds in the goal square and kicking them from the top of the square. Was that what it was like? Nat Fife parked forward in your Colt side?
Nah, he was sort of a high half forward. So he was there. Louis Broome actually kicked, I think 5 as well in that game. Yep. He ended up, it was between those two to get the best on award.
What was he like to play with as a Colt?
Fifey?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was good. He sort of come from nowhere through, because I played PSA against him as well. So he was, I think he ended up playing thirds in year 11, I think, just because he was having a run around with his mates. Wow. And then took it a bit serious in year 12. And then at Claremont, he was a good teammate and a good mate.
It was a handy grand final. Travis Collier played as well. Ryan Neitz ended up at West Coast, and Peel had Harley Bennell, Aaron Black. It was a good side. What are your memories of the day? How did you go?
I don't think I got that many touches, but I was just happy to be playing. I think I was playing backline in the back pocket. And me and another Broome fella, Sonny Dan, was down there as well. So, it was just good. We called it the dream team, all us Indigenous boys. We had Jarek Whedon, Louis Broome, Damien Crispin, Jolie Coyne from down Albany way. Yeah.
Fantastic. What about sort of graduating to the reserves? It was a really successful club at the time, but that certainly filtered down to the reserves. So flags in 2010, 11, 12 and 16. Were you involved in all of those, and what was your time in the reserves like? It's obviously frustrating to a point, but as a younger guy coming up and playing senior footy, it would have been a good experience, first of all.
Yeah, I think, 2010, the league, we were both in the grand final, and that was when Claremont lost to Swan Districts in that great game. So it was a tough side to break into. I was lucky enough to play a few league games in that first year, but then some injuries after that. So, but it was, reserves footy is just about biding your time, I guess, until you feel you're comfortable and you get in your own, I guess, skills, and you feel comfortable on the field, and you're comfortable that you deserve to be at that level, and that's sort of where I got to at the end of my career.
And at one point in the reserves, you got a call from a club legend, Clancy Rutherford. Can you tell us a little bit about what this call was all about, and what it meant to you, and how it shaped the rest of your WAFL career?
Yeah, well, I guess with Clancy, I was at a stage, where I was sort of on the fringe about where I was playing my football. I was actually looking at either hanging them up or going to another club. and Clancy had just finished up, and he rang me and he said he wanted me to wear the number 2 jersey. As in, I guess, WAFL back in those days, the lower numbers were like, pretty much starters for the league side, where the higher numbers were given to the 2s and fringe players. So I started wearing 55 when I first started my league career. And then, he rang me. And then, when he rang me, my mentality changed, and I sort of, someone of that stature, club captain, played the similar style of footy as well. And it was a privilege and an honour to wear number 2. So that sort of made me hang around more. And when he gave me that, after that, I sort of made it the goal that, I wanted to try playing a league flag. And then if it wasn't a league flag, to try play 100 games.
What sort of interaction did you have with Clancy before, and what did he mean to Claremont as club captain and a club great?
Yeah, he was just someone that looked out for me, I guess. I think he liked the way I played the footy as well from a young age, and he was always looking out for me and trying to get me involved where he could. We've still got a good relationship today, so it just shows, what kind of a person he is. He was a great leader, someone who gets their broad jaw broken, and then tries to play footy 2 weeks later. That just shows, what kind of mentality he's got.
Then, of course, so you made your league debut in your first season, and then starting to sort of solidify your spot a little bit. Of course, you went on to play 100 games of league footy, but do you remember a moment where you started to feel comfortable in that league side? You sort of touched on that's part of the goal, isn't it? Do you remember maybe a game or a moment where you went, yeah, look, I'm up to the level here. This capers for me?
Yeah, it was probably when I was about 24, 25. I think I had a chat with one of the previous captains season before. I was sort of on the fringe, and said, what do I need to do to get into the side? With, I think it was Michael Broadbridge was a coach at the time, and captain Jake Murphy, and they just said you needed to get fitter. So I just put my head down the next pre-season, and from that year on, I think I played 21 games the next season, and that was sort of, I guess, my body. I was never the fittest runner, or I never used to like running long distance. Even from a young age.
Which is ironic, because am I right in saying you've since run the New York Marathon?
Yeah. I did that the first year I came back in 2019, which is another experience, yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine. What's life like as a league player? You've obviously, I know you had a trade for a little while. What's it like, particularly on the fringes, being in and out? You've got the stress of footy, but you're not like an AFL player. You're not in that club environment 24/7 where you can sort of, you can focus on that. What's it like dealing with the stress of being a fringe player, but also having to get a job and having friends and a social life and family and that sort of thing all in the mix too?
Yeah, I guess that's where a lot of players either make it or they don't. Especially, like the boys I spoke about through Colts. They went through different paths, and they had young families and whatnot at the time, and I was always about trying to get into that routine. Playing WAFL footy is like, it's pretty much a full-time job these days, and even back then, what they expect you to do, it makes it tough. But it's all about finding that balance and doing what's right for you. Everyone's different.
Now, one thing that was a bit of an issue for you throughout your football time and particularly your league career were head knocks and repeated head knocks and head trauma and concussions and that sort of thing. Do you remember the first time you got a really serious head knock, and how did that make you feel? Did it knock you around? What was your recovery like?
Yeah, I guess it was going back to PSA days when I had my first serious one. Throughout my career, I never really... I suffered bad from delayed concussion. So I'd get a head knock and then I'd feel fine. And then after the game, I'd really go downhill. that's sort of what happened when I was in playing PSA. Had a head knock playing in Christchurch, and because I was boarding, I actually was going out to a friend's house after that. So I actually went to his house after, and he just really deteriorated really quickly. And it's a bit frightening being on your own as a young, teenager, not knowing what's going on with your body or why you're feeling a certain way. And then, the same sort of happened throughout my WAFL career as well. And I guess it was just, But then also in my WAFL career, I had my own, aspirations. So I used to, I'd probably get in trouble for saying it, but I used to fudge my concussion tests because I had so many. And looking back in hindsight, I probably wish I didn't do that. And I wish I, had more care for my own well-being and safety, especially today with what's going on with a lot of the head knock stuff.
Was fudging the concussion tests, was it a widespread thing? Were people across the league doing it? Were other guys who had repeated head knocks talking about doing it? And when you think about that now, how do you look back on that?
I don't know if other people did it. I just knew that it's pretty much the same test you do every time. You got to remember some words and some phrases and whatnot, and when you do it repetitively, it sort of becomes, you can get away with it. And I don't know if other people do it. I wouldn't be surprised if there is some that, because football's the thing we love. And thinking back then, I'd do anything to play football. Wouldn't care if I was on one leg, or I just love to be out there.
So in like a practical sense, so you'd have am I right in saying you'd have a test in pre-season or when you first get to the club, and they'd get like a baseline for you, and then if you had a head knock, they'd test you, and if you came in below that or below a certain level, you'd be deemed concussed?
I don't know what they do today, but back then it was just only if you had a head knock, then you'd have a test, I guess on the Monday training when you came in, or Sunday, to see I guess your memory and if there's anything, you'd get assessed by the doctor. But I could fudge my way through it.
What do you know of some of the more famous stories around head trauma and CTE? So like Polly Farmer, another great Indigenous footballer, and Shane Tark, and all the ones that come out of American sports. How do you sort of view that now?
Yeah, I guess it's just the hard thing is they can't find out. While you're alive, they have to examine your brain, which is difficult. But going through what I've been through today, they can pick up signs. But when you have an MRI on your brain or CT, it's not always going to show some of those effects that brain trauma from impact has caused. So I guess I was thinking about it just the other day, that I think if I had a young son playing football from a young age, I'd probably take him to get a MRI or CT from a young age, and then I'd probably have one every year just to compare, to see if there's any, I guess, significant changes.
You're obviously still playing now. 62 goals for Cable Beach this year. It's like shelling peas for you, kicking goals. But do you think you'll play for much longer, given all this?
Nah, this year will be my last year. Yeah, I just sort of I've lost a bit of passion playing up here in the footy, and I'd like to find time to sort of give back to the next generation and try support where I can, if it's with the Kimberley Spirit team up here or wherever. Try develop the next WAFL AFL stars from the Kimberley.
You touched on a little bit of the sort of depression and going and seeking help for that sort of thing. Was that something that came about as you were sort of grappling with all of this and the effects of the head knock? Did it come from the head knocks? Have you sort of had that had that diagnosed?
Yeah, I haven't had it diagnosed. They can't say whether it was. It might have just been depression, but yeah, I don't. There hasn't been. I guess you can't say it wasn't, but you can't say it was. It's that grey area because they don't know, especially with CTE until you're dead. I guess until they examine your brain. But it was just noticing those signs and being a young male, especially myself. I don't like to open up to others. Even my partner, she hates it. I just don't talk.
Yeah.
And then as soon as I, decided to go see someone professionally, it was a major, relief off my shoulders, I guess. And I started to get better within myself. Because I guess when you're speaking, to family, it's a bit hard to open up sometimes because, you might think they're judging you or something. So when I saw a professional, I knew, that was strictly professional, so I could say how I was feeling, or and as soon as I did that, I just started to feel a lot more better.
Did that have an effect on your day-to-day life? You do really important work up there in the sort of juvenile justice space. Do you feel like it freed you up? Did it free up your footy? Did it free up your work? Did you just sort of generally feel better for having spoken to someone?
I guess it was more feeling better at home. Yeah. At work, I could switch off. I wouldn't think, I was more there trying to help the others, especially young fellas coming through there as well. Just trying to be a better role model, and I guess you put on that brave face and you try, try not to show them what weakness, I guess, and just try push through to be a better role model for them. Yeah.
Would you, particularly in your work with those sort of kids and in your really strong ties with country footy, is that something you'd encourage people to go and do? Is to go and see a professional?
Yeah, definitely. Especially now that there's, at first some people might not think they have the money or to go see not so much a doctor or a GP, but to see a psychiatrist. But now there's certain things in place where I think the government, you can get 6 free, if you're referred from a GP, I think it's 6 free sessions, and they call it like a mental health plan. Yeah.
Do we on the head knock stuff? Do you think we need to do more in country footy? And what are some things you mentioned, the MRIs and stuff? What are some things that you feel in country footy we can do to make sure that going out there and playing a game of footy on a Saturday or a Sunday is as safe as possible?
Yeah, I think country footy, it's that brand of tough footy. You get a head knock and you just say, or someone would put on a big bump, and sometimes, some of them are clean and some are not. You sort of get up and you go, oh, I need to play through this kind of thing, just for that, that brand of being a tough football player in the country. So that's one thing I'd say is, just make sure you're looking after your own self first, because, football's not going to be there forever. And you at the end of it, you especially when you're only young, you're 30 and you want to try to live to 70, 80. You don't want to be a vegetable down that track. So I would suggest, getting an MRI or just having your brain, just so that at the end or at the start of your career, so at the end of your career, you can actually compare to see if there has been any damage done. I don't know if they do it in the AFL today or not, but I think that's something that would be good. I'm not a, doctor or anything, but that's just something that I would recommend from what I've sort of been through.
You touched on the AFL there. How do you sort of look upon what they're doing and the 12-day protocol and stuff like that? Are you comfortable in that they're doing enough?
Yeah, definitely. I think there's a lot more being put in to it today than there was, back when I was coming through. So over the last couple of years, there's been a lot more due diligence from the AFL to, really put the player first rather than, players wanting to play for the team.
Now, another thing you came up a little bit during your career, and I'm sure throughout your life, but unfortunately on a football field as well, and it's something that's still obviously a massive issue, was a little bit of racism and some vilification and stuff like that. And there are a couple of sort of higher profile cases towards the end of your career. What sort of problem is that in football at the moment?
It's still a big problem. I guess not just in football, but every sport. It's hard when you've been the victim, especially when you pull someone out or pull someone up for saying it. It's hard because you end up becoming the perpetrator for standing up for your own rights. And I guess in a local league, it's always more difficult because it's always your word against theirs. There's no cameras, there's no microphones. It's about, I guess, the perpetrators owning up to what they say, because as soon as you own up to it, you can learn from it. One thing I was always taught is that, you're not born a racist. It's something that's taught. That's and it makes it difficult when you're the victim because you've got to take it home with you. And that's also, when people take it home, that's when they fall in dark holes as well, and they can get depressed. And
Was it a problem growing up north as a youngster? Was it something you experienced more in Perth?
Yeah, definitely more in Perth. Broome's a very multicultural town. My background, I'm Chinese, Aboriginal, and my mum's, English, Australian. So, yeah, and that, there's a lot of different races in Broome. So it never really happened in Broome, only when I moved to Perth.
You spent time at Claremont with Hayden Yarran, who recently, obviously, really bravely spoke out about this sort of issue. How do you look on this now? Is it something that, are we getting better at it? What do we need to do to get better at it? And did you sort of reach out to Yarran during that time?
Yeah, I definitely did. I remember when I was going through it, Jared Oakley-Nichols, he sort of went through it himself, so I reached out to him as well. I personally think the penalty should be a bit more stricter than what it is, because, I guess today everyone wants to protect their image, especially from local clubs or even in the AFL. It's all about protecting the image of your club. But at the end of the day, if you're standing up for something that's, very inappropriate or, I guess that's inappropriate. It's, that's not the image your club should be portraying. And that's, I think, something that Hayden stood up for. And I guess as I was saying before, it's hard when you're in those local leagues because it's, he says she's, your word against theirs, with no witnesses around. It makes it difficult to actually prove it. But, someone's not going to stand up and say, this person said something that's not true. When there's a lot of emotion into it, there's a reason that emotion's coming through, is because they're standing up for what they believe in.
Yeah. What's next for Keifer Yu? I know you'd love to end your time in footy with a flag at Cable Beach this season, and you're well on your way to doing that. But what's life after footy like, and what does work look like for you?
Yeah, live a pretty good life up here. I'd like to spend more weekends. Football takes up a lot of time. So I like to spend a lot more time with my family, fishing, getting out hunting, that kind of stuff. But also, trying to get back to the younger kids coming through, and teach them some of the things that I was taught through my career, and pass that on to them. So hopefully, they have aspirations to, make AFL, or if it's not just AFL, my aspiration was just to play at the highest level for as long as I could.
we've seen some really brilliant footballers come from that part of the world in the last couple of years. Is there more to look forward to from the talent pool up there?
Definitely, there's a lot of skillful players up here. It's just some of them might not have. They've got different sort of support avenues. I was pretty fortunate enough to have the family. Yeah, my family support me pretty well. So it's finding ways that I can or work with them or support them, or finding other people that can support them if they want to make the transition to Perth. It's a very it's 2,000 kilometres away from Broome. So you think of kids that are coming from the East Kimberley as well. That's even further. That's a long way from home. When you look at landscapes like Europe, when you could be on one side of the world.
What about in your workspace? So working the sort of juvenile justice space, you're doing some really important stuff there, which we touched on. Does football help in a community like that to sort of bring some of these kids together? And I know that a lot of the kids that find themselves down the path where you end up dealing with them probably haven't had the privilege of being tied up in a sporting community. Do you think it helps in an area like the Kimberley?
It definitely helps. Yeah, there's especially with the likes of Clontarf and whatnot going around, but a lot of the clientele that I deal with, they're not really going to school at the moment. So it's about trying to be that support to try to get them involved more, because I guess from a young age they haven't been involved in those environments. And I guess the ones you see doing it, they seem to be doing well, and not be getting in as much trouble, compared to those that are just doing antisocial stuff all the time. It's about trying to find those, social, sporting, whatever it is. We try to take kids out on country, and re-engage them that way, to culture as well. But it's about being that support for them.
And do you still keep up with the Tigers? They're having another good year this year, looking for another tilt at the finals and maybe a little bit more. Do you still have mates at the club, and are still a really active supporter of Claremont footy?
Yeah, I am. We had our reserves and league reunion from 2012 earlier this year, so came down and watched Claremont play East Freo at the WACA, which is good. Still got a few mates there, still rolling around. I actually handed my jumper to Francis Watson to try build that culture with the jumper. It's pretty similar to what Wurapunda's done at the Eagles. It's not about, I guess, wearing the number 2. It's about building that culture for the next generation to show that they're welcome at the club. That they feel at home, to try keep them there, a little bit longer. I know Franny's, going through his second ACL rehabilitation at the moment, so I'm wishing him all the best. But and I think if I probably say this now, but if he didn't have that jumper, he probably might have thrown it in. So it's about creating that culture.
Keith, you're doing fantastic work. It's a really important message that you've you sort of bravely opened up on today. It's something that's going to be really important over the next little bit in top-down football. So AFL, obviously, and country footy is no exception. So it's really important, and we appreciate you coming on today and having this discussion, and hope all is well.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, mate. Cheers. Thanks for listening to this episode of Bush Footy Legends. If you enjoyed the show, make sure you like, follow and share it with your mates. Make sure you check in on them while you're there. For tips and advice on how to look after yourself, your family and your mates, visit thinkmentalhealthwa.com.au. Get in touch with us through our Instagram page at WA Country Football, or if you want to suggest a guest, email us at wafc.com.au. If you're after more, stay tuned. We'll have an episode dropping every week.